Welcome to Disrupting Peace, a show about why peace hasn't worked and how it still could. I'm Bridget Conley, Research Director at the World Peace Foundation. This season, we're focusing on the first steps that everyday people can take towards peace. Now, we've all heard the phrase toxic masculinity. Today, we're going to explore why this isn't the most helpful concept, and more importantly, how healthy masculinity can increase peace. To learn more, I'm speaking with Gary Barker and Caroline Ferraz Ignacio. Gary Barker is an international voice for healthy manhood, gender equality, and violence prevention. He is the founder and CEO of Equimundo Center for Masculinities and Social Justice, an organization that works globally, including in the U.S., to engage men and boys in healthy masculinities. Caroline Ferraz Ignacio is an international development expert focused on gender equity and social inclusion. She's worked with the Instituto Promundo in Brazil, Promundo Portugal, and Equimundo to support research and programming across Latin America and Europe. She also worked with the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, as the Gender and Inclusive Development Advisor in Colombia and as the Gender and Social Norms Advisor in Washington, D.C. In this conversation, we see what we can learn from successful interventions in Brazil and Colombia, unpack the man box, and learn tools for opening up conversations around masculinity rather than shutting them down. Caroline, Gary, welcome to Disrupting Peace.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
So we're going to start with an icebreaker with a game that I call Laws Against Men. In this game, I will read a part of a U.S. law that relates to men and is currently on the books in at least one U.S. state. Your job is to finish the law. Okay, first one. In Alabama, it is illegal to wear a fake mustache under what circumstances?
I don't think I'll be very good at this game.
It's U.S.-centric, so Caroline, you're right.
I'm going to say that a woman is not supposed to wear a mustache. I don't know. That's the kind of first one that comes to mind.
The answer is if it causes laughter in church.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay, our second one. In Longmeadow, Massachusetts, it is illegal for two men, and men are specified, to carry what across the town green?
This is a very hard game.
I'm sorry.
So it feels like there's going to be something about homosexuality going on here, but maybe not. I don't know. So
No. The answer is a bathtub.
What?
a bathtub. Okay.
How many times does this have to happen for it to become a law?
Exactly. I keep wondering what happened in this town.
So well, because there it is. They don't want two men getting in the bathtub together, evidently, right? I think I'm going to guess there's some homophobia going on in here.
My mind went to a much darker place. I'm going to be honest with you, Bridget.
Okay, the final one. This one might be an urban legend, and it isn't even gender related, but when I stumbled across it, I thought it was an important law. In Oklahoma, it's illegal for anyone to take a bite out of someone else's what?
The cleanest answer would be sandwich.
Exactly. It's hamburger.
There you go.
Okay.
Which, frankly, I agree with completely. Okay. Well, thank you for playing. Facial hair, bathtubs, and hamburgers aside, today we are also going to address some serious issues related to masculinity and peace. For starters, I wanted to note for our audience that it is mostly males who lead countries into war, who are the generals of militaries, and who are both the perpetrators and the victims of armed violence. And that holds true during times of war or peace. In this conversation, we want to talk about new ideas of masculinity that can help us take the first steps to peace. But before we get there, let's address the problem. So we've all heard the phrase toxic masculinity, and I think there's kind of a gut level understanding of how that connects to violence. But Gary, can you connect the dots? How do ideas of masculinity connect to
Yeah.
violence?
I mean, first off, just, lighthearted or directly is that we just don't like that phrase, toxic masculinity.
Yeah, of course.
It's sort of a conversation non-starter in terms of it feels to a lot of men like, you think all men are bad. So to your comment around men are the vast majority of those who start wars, affected by wars. Yes, that's true. And it's a minority of men who are involved in starting wars and other forms of violence as well. So what do we call it? Where do we go with it? Sometimes we'll call it myths about manhood.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes we'll call it the man box. And we can fill in what those myths are. That physical strength is the measure of a man, that men are mostly the providers. And if they aren't, they can't find other sources of meaning and purpose in the world. That men don't show vulnerability. They're always ready to go into the fight. We don't go for medical care. We don't stop and ask for directions. All the kinds of stuff that we weave into these ideas about manhood. I suppose I would just end by saying these are not part of our biological genetic makeup as men. These are things made over centuries. They're constructed, they're socially learned, they're reinforced in movies that Hollywood makes, the internet that we follow, the friends we hang out with, our dads in the military, and lots of other places. It's not inevitable.
Yeah. And I'm just curious, the man box, that's kind of an interesting concept. What exactly is that?
So Paul Kivel came up with this idea of thinking of these ideas about manhood as like boxing men in. So
Okay.
not seeking help, not having friendships, not showing deeper social connections. It has been women's rights activists who have called and made a conversation around gender and around manhood. But I think the man box works well because it does help say, well, it does kind of repress men while also causing harm for all of us.
Yeah, I can definitely see how that's better, a better framing. Gary, in your work, how do you take the first steps to invite men and boys to tell a different story?
Yeah. A couple of questions to get a conversation going. Tell me who you care about and tell me who cares about you. Tell me what's expected around you and who deeply cares for you. And I think we'll get a conversation that moves you away from anger first, violence first, and more into what are the human relationships that sustain you? And that as a pathway to the connection. Trump supporting white men who we've done focus group discussions with, who you would think they're ready to throw gasoline on a fire. They'll talk for half an hour about their daughters and how they care about them and their partners who they might want to say, come back home and, be a trad wife. But he knows that isn't going to happen. And he'll talk less about his anger toward immigrants than he will about how he's just trying to do well by his family. So I give those as examples of, parlor tricks that we use to shift the conversation to get men to talk about what really matters to them and less about the provocations that drive them to think about the harm they say they might want to cause to others.
And if I can, Bridget, just add to that, I think it's really important that we talk about the framing of these issues. So
Yeah.
if you're going to say that you're going to do a workshop on gender equity, men are not going to show up. You have to
Yeah.
actually use the language that is interesting to them and focus on the problems that are affecting them. So one thing that I think Equimundo did a really great job in Brazil was they found kind of a moment in a man's life where they're more acceptable to have these conversations. That's when
Yeah.
he's expecting his first child. So working
Oh,
with men during that phase, along with their partner, and getting them prepared for what fatherhood might look like, that's an important window where you can talk about these other issues related to masculinities as well. And for example, in Colombia, the Pacific Coast is a region that has a very high Afro-Colombian population. And they're really known for their really delicious cuisine, lots of seafood, lots of coconut. It's amazing. You should come try it. But something that we did is we took advantage of the Pedroño Festival. It focuses on Afro-Colombian culture and got men to do some culinary sessions talking about their cuisine. And I was talking about who does the cooking in their home, why is it important to for men to be involved in that, how can they contribute to the household, unpaid labor, and getting men to value their culture in that region, but also value it through a lens of gender equity.
so Carolini, that was the question I was going to pose to you is, what does this look like in a program, right? How do you get to the point of moving, like engaging people in meaningful conversations about their care and their lives from an intersection where you've got them ready to talk to making bigger changes in life?
Yeah.
I think it's also identifying where people are at the moment. So with USAID in Colombia, we used to use a spectrum, which is a willingness to change spectrum, where we divided men into different groups. One were those who have already started the process to change, who already demonstrate equitable gender behaviors within their homes. In the middle are those that are willing, maybe show some positive behaviors in the home, but are still resistant in some other areas, maybe is homophobia. And then those who are the most resistant to change. And it's really important to cater the strategies according to where the men are at the
Mm,
different points of the spectrum. Because it's not going to be the same to talk to a man who's very resistant to change as to a man who thinks that he's already performing gender equity, who's already demonstrating equitable behavior. There isn't just a one size fits all formula for how to be a man. So, for example, in Colombia, we worked with indigenous men to identify what are the aspects of masculinities that promote well being in their community, that promote connections, but also what are the aspects of indigenous masculinities that may promote gender based violence or GBV. How can we adjust that in a way that's also respectful of their culture, that's respectful of their cosmovision, of their cosmology? And there are also really practical steps that we need to take. Identify what the hooks are for men in different communities. So, for example, in Colombia, we also found that working with men around their jobs, we worked with cacao farmers, we worked with miners, really using their context to be able to connect with them and engage with them in a meaningful way. Because if you invite a man to talk about gender equity, they're like, no, 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 that's not for me, or I'm not interested, or sure, I'll go, but then never show up. And so it's really important to use language that is appropriate, that's relevant, that's inclusive of their needs. So, one example with the cacao farmers, there's a big push to substitute coca farming in Colombia. And so, cacao was one of the different products that we're trying to substitute coca farming with. However, there was a need to be able to include the whole family, to include both husbands and wives in the cacao farming because they needed more people to be able to do the different roles of the production. And so we were able to work with men and women to understand how they can work together to not only produce the plant, but also to process it and to sell it in a way that's beneficial to the community and that the women's work is recognized and not just invisible labor and unpaid labor.
So, Gary, what about for you? Where in your work have you seen transformations happen?
So, one example from Brazil is together with the Ministry of Health in Brazil, worked with a group of activists and researchers to help Brazil create a men's health program. And one of the things it tries to do is very simple approach of inviting men into a prenatal visit. You screen for violence, and it's the woman's choice if she wants him there. Work with the health professional to make a simple protocol of how to invite him in the door. And among the invite him in the door is talking to him about the results of the prenatal visit, talking him through the process of the pregnancy together with the partner, and inviting him to come for his own services for a follow-up. So it's done as an opt-out. That is, the nurse or the caregiver says, I've got slots at these times next week. Which do you want? Instead of asking him, do you want to come? And then you've got a pretty low-tech training of professionals in man, here's the health system, here's men. It's, some of it's as easy as call him by his name, have a chair for him in the room, have some materials that are designed for men that are up there with all the other stuff that's mostly about women and children. And diversity has also been a key part. So it doesn't show one guy who looks like a middle-class white guy on a Brazilian TV show, but that looks like the diversity of Brazil. That program has stuck. It doesn't cost very much. It reaches hundreds of thousands a year. It's really the systems change that we see leading to big stuff. In Rwanda, we're doing it in a different way, which is men will come to group education activities, as in 90% of them will, in rural areas, which is most of Rwanda. There they will come, and they'll come to a 16-session training process, half with their partners, half with men alone. That's become a nationally scaled program, or is on the process of becoming, in partnership with the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Gender Equality. So again, that setting, you can't get nearly as many Brazilian men who want to come to 17, 16 sessions, but in Rwanda you can. Specify rural Rwanda, where men mostly work in subsistence agriculture. Or, a third one from another setting more like the US. We're working in the UK in schools in London with a small teacher-led package of healthy masculinity, boys and girls. It's ages 10 to 13, building that into a 45-minute a week session that's part of their social emotional learning, personal skills session. Everyone's watched Adolescence on Netflix, so it's taking advantage of the buzz about the manosphere and the kind of panic around boys to
Yeah.
say, let's have a meaningful conversation about it, led by teachers.
Yeah. And Caroline, following up on that too, one of the projects that I think you worked on was with USAID and trying to engage and create more positive models of masculinity in the public sphere. Can you talk about some of that work?
Yeah, so we were focused on what are the underlying causes of gender inequity because in Colombia, we have about 40% of women are survivors of gender based violence. It's even higher if you're talking about Afro Colombian women or indigenous women, where about half of them are survivors of gender based violence. And
Wow.
GBV has become very normalized. GBV, which is gender based violence, especially invisible forms like excessive control, psychological violence, economic violence. So the first step is understanding that something is violence with both men and women, taking someone's cell phone or reviewing, not letting a woman go out, not letting her go to a doctor's appointment, not letting her have friends, etc. That is violence because there was a misconception that if there wasn't any physical violence, there was no GBV in the relationship. It's important to be creative to understand who are the key partners in a community that have the wider reach to transform social norms in a community. And so one of the ways that we did that is a kind of controversial way, which is working with telenovelas.
And for our audience, if they don't know, I think a lot of people do, but what are telenovelas?
They're basically very popular TV shows that can last for months at a time. So there were some episodes where we would help to fund that episode, but that meant that we got to sit in a room with the writers and help them design that episode, identify what are the points that we want seen in that episode. How can we show positive examples of masculinities? How can we also show invisible forms of GBV and identify that as a problem to help people understand that sometimes what they see as normal doesn't mean that that's right or healthy.
Okay. Gary, I wanted to turn to the report that your organization, that Equimundo recently put out, the State of American Men 2025. Can you talk about what some of the more compelling research findings were that you discuss in the report?
Yeah, it's not fun reading because we all know the outcomes of these presidential elections and the number of men, particularly who swung their votes toward Trump. And not just, because they like his red caps of Make America Great Again, but he is appealing to, and what our study found is a deep sense of economic and social precarity. Quite simply, lots of men feel lost. And so the equation that we see pulling together is men feeling very unsure about their economic presence and futures. Quite simply, this idea that AI is coming for your job as a future is like AI is here for your job in a lot of sectors of the economy. We also saw that young men in particular want to be more masculine, and that men and women put at the top of the chart the main thing that it is to be a man is to be a provider.
Yeah.
So you feel economically unsure about your present and your future. You don't think you can make it. You're not finding status. You don't find recognition. You're socially disconnected, which we found a huge amount as well. And then about two-thirds think men can be called out or their reputation destroyed by a single comment. So there's also this feeling that somehow that the power dynamics have shifted such that, you can be canceled with just a single word. We know that's exaggerated, of course, but that's the vibe that lots of young men in particular feel. Young men who feel that sense of precarity are more likely to buy into the thing we call the man box, this rigid view of manhood. They're more likely to vote for Trump. They're more likely to support militias. They're more likely to say the president shouldn't worry about elections or Congress. So we've got this really, really perfect storm that explains a lot of why there's some aspects of what Trump is doing at the moment that are unpopular, but a lot of what he's doing from ICE raids on are resonating with a lot of men who feel like, if the world's against me, I'm against the rest of the world, and I'm going to step in line with that tough guy version of manhood. That's the equation that we're trying to step into. The other, of course, is a lot of data around men's online lives. The main reason guys say they go online to the space we may call the manosphere is for fun and to find people like them. The second reason they go there is to vent. And that's where they find people who they may not have been initially like, but they click on those spaces because they get lots of likes of other guys who like rant on dude, and you should be part of this space. And so I think a lot of guys aren't going online to find misogyny and hate, but misogyny and hate comes their way when, a couple of taps into whatever YouTube, Reddit, Discord, or TikTok, voice that they're following, that algorithm pulls them in pretty quickly to go, yeah, you think that's bad. Let me tell you more. And the cycle becomes you were a little bit angry. You come out at the end of a session enraged and maybe ready to sign on to a group that we should be worried about.
Yeah. One point in the report, one of the arguments that really struck me was this idea that men simultaneously feel caged by those masculine norms, but at the same time, they also give them a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
And so, how do you reconcile these two things?
I mean, it gives you street cred, right? The things we hold up as like the central myth of manhood around physical strength and toughness is what gives you points. And
Yeah.
particularly as you look to the online world where guys are spending, all of us are spending a lot of time, but young men in particular, and where they've got fewer folks around them who are questioning what they're seeing. Yes, that looks like how I get points for my self worth. Add to that the 40% of guys, young men, who tell us they don't think anyone will ever fall in love with them.
It's heartbreaking.
It's about a third overall for women and men ages 18 to 45, which is already a statement on like how challenging we're finding it to find genuine love and connection these days in the modern US. But even highest among young men ages 18 to 25, where it went up to close to 40%.
I think
Wow.
part of that problem also, Gary, is people understanding what is
What is
love.
love?
What is
Yes.
love?
I
Yeah.
feel a song coming on. Yeah, exactly.
It's either idealized or or we don't know because maybe we haven't learned it very well, or we've been used to relationships where you're, sort of taking advantage of the other instead of, a deeper, meaningful, intimate connection.
Yeah. Gary, let's go back to how men are impacted by the online world.
We heard the number of young guys who felt like used to be I was compared to, Jason, the neighbor, or the other guy on the track team. Now I'm
Right.
compared to the humanity of males who are online strutting their stuff. We've got the tough guy look. And on the other hand, there's Timothy Chalamet. And I've seen a couple of New York Times articles recently on the appeal of the sensitive guy and all the things that he does to signify that. So I mean, the challenge, however, is that all of us too often are performing instead of finding like, what's the authentic self I want to be? And how can I feel safe and accepted being that?
Yeah. So, how does supporting a healthy masculinity increase peace? You've given us some examples, but I wonder if we could just hit that one spot on the head.
I mean, you don't get through boyhood without experiencing some violence from another boy or man. 80% and up tell us they've either witnessed it, experienced it themselves, and or used it themselves. And we know how much if you are a witness of certain forms of it or a victim of certain forms as a child, you are 2 to 3 times more likely to use it as an adult. And I think our field has had a trouble. We make a lot of noise about violence and we need to, but I think that the studying of nonviolence, we've got to step into even language around it. Like, what is the opposite of violence? Is peace simply the absence of a conflict happening? Like, what's the end goal that we want to put in place? We've put caring there because it feels like a good all purpose verb. I mean, it means both care for children, self care, care for a partner, care for my community, care for the planet, and to be able to envision what caring communities and caring relationships look like rather than simply only calling out the violence and the harm.
Yeah. Gary, I do a lot of work with people who are incarcerated, particularly men, because we teach inside men's prisons. And I was shocked at how many of them talk about, especially sexual abuse
Yeah.
as children.
Yeah.
It's really well known around women who are incarcerated experience sexual violence, but
Yeah.
I've been surprised by those who will talk about it, how widespread it is for young boys too. And Yeah.
The global figures are 1 in 5 women experience childhood sexual violence and 1 in 7 men.
Oh, that's really high.
And the 1 in
Yeah.
7 we don't really talk much about. And in talking about boys, I actually think I also care about girls because it is those boys who experience that who are more likely to carry it out.
Caroline, how do you make the tie between masculinity and peacefulness?
I think that part of the problem is that we look at our lives in different boxes. We don't see how every aspect of our life is interconnected. I really like the video we use a lot, especially with our kids, that shows, someone at work being yelled at by their boss and then coming home and yelling with their spouse and then the spouse yelling with the kids. And these are cycles of violence that we see
Yeah.
everywhere. But I think that something really important is, what is our goal? And for me and the work that I've done, the goal is to be able to have people live their lives freely and make decisions that help them be who they are in society. And a lot of the times, these different gender norms that we face don't let us be who we really want to be in our lives.
Yeah.
There's a pressure on men, there's pressure on women, there's pressure on everyone to follow a certain role.
So we've been talking a lot in this conversation in really binary terms, and I wonder if either one of you can help us understand the question about masculinities in a way that is not limited to that binary of male female.
Mm.
I love this question. First of all, we have a misconception that when we talk about gender, we're talking about women, or we're talking about LGBTQI plus groups. And that's not the case. We in this chat know that everyone is impacted by gender in society. But I also think that by talking about gender roles and kind of breaking away from these traditional expectations around gender roles and gender norms, we're also opening space for people who are non binary, because a lot of times the violence that they face is because they don't conform to expectations around being male or female. And so by lessening the pressure to comply to certain expectations, you're making the world safer and more inclusive, not just for women and men, but also for non binary people.
Great answers. Thank you both. We always end the interviews with an exercise we call collective dreaming.
Mm.
So I'm going to give us a historical pointer. We're going to start with an iconically male actor whose career included westerns, war, and adventure films. So I'm going to start with John Wayne. He's born in 1907, right over 100 years ago, and he died in 1979, which was just 45 years ago. And for us, if we imagine another 45 years into the future, so pretend it's the year 2070, let's say we've succeeded in creating societies where boys have many versions of masculinity to choose from and diverse role models to inspire them. Our men feel empowered both to give and receive care and support. What are the first steps that we need to take today in order to get to that future? Gary, do you want to go
Mm.
first?
Where do we go?
Yeah.
Um, all of our boys have opportunities to practice caregiving and empathy in school and at home. They've got access to icons of boys and men who show that caring is the new courage and feeling like they've got scripts outlined for them. We've got policies in place that say there's equal paid leave and there's equal cash transfers for male caregivers as much as for female caregivers, that there's no primary caregiver listed on your HR form when you decide to have a child. We reduce the barriers to young men seeking help for depression, other mental health stuff, trauma.
Yes.
I'd say that as we gradually reduce our militaries in the meantime, if a country has mandatory conscription like a South Korea, half of those should be women. I could go on longer, but I'll start with those.
All right. Those are good starting points. Carolini?
Yeah, unfortunately, the data shows that in 45 years, we're not going to have gender equity
Yeah.
yet. Um, but I think that the most important aspects for me are those in terms of, what are the expectations around caregiving
Yeah.
and time use in the home? Are we equitably dividing caregiving and unpaid care work in the home between men and women? I think that's going to be a key factor for promoting peace, for promoting economic inclusion, for promoting political participation, et cetera. Another point would be the access to mental health services, like Gary
Yeah.
mentioned, especially
Yeah.
in areas that are impacted by high rates of violence. In Colombia, we have the armed conflict. And I think a third aspect would be really working on those those expectations around what does a loving relationship, a romantic relationship look like?
Yeah.
What does a healthy relationship look like? Because a lot of areas we've seen that what people think is a healthy romantic relationship really isn't a healthy romantic relationship. So
Yeah.
transforming the expectation around love and what it means to be in love and have a partner.
Those are beautiful activities. And I'd love for us to get even more direct. What are some first steps that everyday people can take today?
Some easy stuff. I mean, start young, talk to boys. If you're a teacher, a parent, a coach, somebody who knows boys, I think you've got an opportunity to model emotional connection, emotional authenticity. I think another piece is at your workplace to question the gendered norms that are all over the place about who takes time off to go care for children or elderly parents. Push for the policies at the workplace. Look at whether your candidate is supporting ideas that men should do our share of the care work and that we should think about men as caregivers. Call out the kind of everyday sexism, as our colleague Laura Bates calls it. So I'd start there.
Yeah, great. Caroline?
Yeah, I'd say let's look at what are the concrete behaviors in our home?
Mhm.
Who is doing more of the work? And what type of
Yeah.
work am I doing versus what type of work are you doing? And how we can make that more equitable. Talk about taboo subjects like menstruation with our boys. This should not be something that women are whispering about and girls are whispering about in the
Yep.
corner. This is a normal, natural part of life. And boys should know something about women's bodies and how they work. And also having open conversations about money and how much people make and what our expectations are at work. I think that a lot of the ways that we keep promoting these gender gaps is by not talking openly about what's going on in our homes, with our friends, with our coworkers.
These are wonderful answers. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much for having us, Bridget. And I appreciate you championing this conversation.
Breaking out of the man box doesn't mean we'll end war, but it will contribute to more resilient and peaceful societies. After I read this year's State of American Men report, I talked about it with a few male friends. They shared how pressured and pained they felt by the burdens of being the breadwinner and living up to masculine ideals. And there's a loneliness when it feels like no one talks about it. I also started seeing things in my daily life differently. I think about a beautiful mommy and baby class at my woman-focused gym, and I wondered, who's hosting the get-togethers for young fathers? There are some great models for this. Look at Dad Guild in Vermont or the Brooklyn Stroller Club, organizations I learned about through Equimundo. The work they, Equimundo, and Caroline do makes the world more equitable and caring. In the past, I have definitely stated that men are impossible, sometimes using more spicy language. So I'm including myself in what needs to change. Men are not impossible, but the dominant and extremely limited idea of masculinity is. I hope this episode will help us all change it. Thanks for listening to Disrupting Peace. I'm Bridget Conley. We've got a link to the State of American Men 2025 report, Vermont's Dad Guild, and the Brooklyn Stroller Club in our show notes. You can find out more about Gary Barker's work at equimundo.org. That's EQUIMUNDO.org. And you can find out more about Caroline Ferraz Ignacio's work at the link in our show notes. Next week on Disrupting Peace, we're exploring what we can learn from Nepal about the connections between emergency response, peace, and resilience.
When we started rebuilding this party, it started coming out looking really, really nice. It made people happy about the open spaces once again. And apart from that, the innovation that the water tank could be housed underneath. They could be like a supply of rescue materials, and people could get access to drinkable water right from the tap. That was something completely new.
Next week's episode will be our last of the season, and we'd love to hear your feedback as we start planning for season 4. Let us know what topics you'd like us to cover next by emailing us at disruptingpeace disruptingpeacepodcast@gmail.com. That's disruptingpeacepodcast@gmail.com. Disrupting Peace is a production of the World Peace Foundation. Find out more at worldpeacefoundation.org. You can also find us on Blue Sky at worldpeacefdtn.bsky.social. And you can find us on Instagram at worldpeacefdtn. The show is produced by myself and Emily Shaw. Engineering by Jacob Winnick and Asia Simpson. Marketing and social media by Kaylin Song. Show artwork by Simon Fung. Special thanks to Jeremy Helton, my colleagues Lisa Avery, B. Arneson, and Alex Duvall, and the team at the Tufts Digital Design Studio, including Kimberly Lynn Ferrero-Arnias and Miles Donovan. Okay, until next time, stay skeptical and hopeful.